Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye in Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there is an exultant reaction in Botswana after the High Court does away with homophobic laws. We hear from one of the staff members from the NGO that brought the petition. Also in Mali, a shaken community begins to come to terms with the scale of a brutal massacre of Dogon villagers, which left 95 dead this week. And in search of a sweet deal, we look at the rise of the rewards of crowdfunding by heading to a bakery in Senegal. But first, it is a landmark case for Africa. On Tuesday, Botswana's High Court decriminalised same-sex relationships. Laws that punished gay sex with up to 7 years in prison were rejected as being unconstitutional. The courtroom erupted in clapping and excitement as the ruling was passed down. Now, it comes less than a month after Kenya's High Court upheld homophobic laws. More than 24 countries on the continent, including Nigeria, Uganda and Ghana, criminalise homosexuality. For more on this, I'm joined now by Kane Youngman from the Legabibo NGO that supported the anonymous petitioner who brought the case. Kane, thanks very much for speaking to us. Now, what impact do you think this judgment will have on gay communities in the country?
So thank you very much for having me. The impact of this judgment is basically just to afford us as the LGBTI community the security to know that we are treated before the law as the same way that any other Botswana who is non-LGBTI identifying is treated. So to say that should I fall sick tomorrow and go to a hospital, maybe it's around issues of sexual and reproductive health, and I go to the hospital and I find a nurse, I will not be scared to go and visit a health facility because of fear that a nurse will ridicule me based on my sexual orientation. And then there are other issues, for example, police, where if I'm in a relationship with a man and maybe I abuse that person will in turn prefer not to go and report the matter to the police because they fear that when they go and report the matter to the police, it will be in a way like they're handing themselves to the police and saying, I'm here, I'm gay, I've been breaking section 161 penal code, you can arrest me. It doesn't become about you being violated. It becomes about, wait, did you say you are in a relationship with a man? They totally forget about the other thing. So it also, in a way, gives us protection as the LGBTI community in general to say the LGBTI forms part of the general Botswana community. So the Constitution provides for their protection, and the courts in Botswana have said that that right should be taken seriously and should not be taken away. So that was basically a strong stance from the courts.
Now, the battle was launched in the courts after the government refused to register your organisation, if I understand it correctly. So despite what judges have said on Tuesday, do you think that much will change in terms of institutional acceptance or rejection of gay people in the country?
I think so. I believe a lot in my country. My country is not as hostile as other countries, as the kind of hostility I see in different countries. And then my country has a better respect for what the court rulings are. And for example, in the case where we want to register an organization, we were successfully registered, and then we started working with various departments. We were invited as Legabibo, as the gay and lesbian organization. So we're expecting the same thing now, because in one of the provisions that we had submitted before the court was that many people, including service providers, are fearing assisting the LGBTI community because they don't know. Some of them innocently believe that by assisting an LGBTI person in whatever service they need from you, you are in a way assisting somebody break the law or commit a crime.
What do you put down the difference between the judgment in the Kenyan High Court and the Botswanan High Court to?
The Kenyan High Court judgment breaks my heart, and my heart really goes out to my Kenyan comrades, especially looking at the submissions they have submitted. It's almost similar to what we have submitted. They have submitted more support than we did, even though the courts are a bit different, even though the environment is a bit different. The Kenyan one is a heartbreak, but I'm hoping that the judgment that has come out of my country will be able to help the Kenyan judgment at the Court of Appeal to turn the tide around. And also, not only for Kenya, I'm hoping that the judgment that we have had will help other countries.
Kane, thank you so much for joining us. In other news, in Sudan, following 3 days of a national strike, protesters on Tuesday reportedly agreed to end a campaign of civil disobedience and restart talks with the ruling military council. They've run the country ever since President Omar Bashir was overthrown in April, following months of protests. Last Monday, demonstrators say that around 100 people were killed when security forces cracked down on rallies. Now, protesters are calling for the return of civilian rule. Ethiopia has been mediating between opposition leaders and ruling generals in Sudan since talks between them broke down last week. The US Assistant Secretary for African Affairs is due in Khartoum this week to discuss the Sudanese crisis with the African Union. Washington's added its voice to international calls for an end to attacks on civilians and for more effort to be put into political dialogue. And Mali's prime ministers visited the village in the centre of the country where 95 people were killed on Monday. The attack on the ethnic Dogon community is part of a landscape of violence. Premier Boubou Cissé paid tribute to the victims in Sobankou and vowed to ramp up security efforts across Mali. Despite military help from France and the UN, the country struggled to contain the degeneration into violence linked to a takeover by religious extremists and Tuareg militants back in 2012. It's still not clear who is behind Monday's bloodshed, but the brutality has shocked the nation.
They immediately encircled the village and shot at everything that moves. So everywhere people were screaming, children were screaming. They all fled into their homes. Then they went into the homes, set them alight, and all those who tried to run were shot down.
It appears they used the same modus operandi as they did in Ogosagu on March the 23rd. And the assailants, when they arrived, set fire to the houses and forced people to get out. Those who went outside were shot down with rifles. And those who stayed inside burned to death.
Well, across Africa, crowdfunding is becoming an increasingly valuable tool for small businesses looking to expand. In Senegal, firms raised about 23 million euros this way last year. Nicolas Chemin has more.
It's a structural problem in sub-Saharan Africa. Many small businesses find it hard to borrow money from Main Street banks. So they resort to crowdfunding like here in Touba, Senegal's second biggest city. It helped fund 40% of this bakery.
It's about getting the maximum number of people to support the project and also to provide inspiration for other projects. That is the idea and the path that really guided us. We could have done it alone, but we wanted to show that crowdfunding is an important lever that impacts our economies.
The aim of the project is also to curb the exodus of young people who risk their lives trying to migrate to Europe.
Every day our children, our brothers, get on boats looking for better lives elsewhere. They all have ties to their homes, to their families, and if they leave, it is because they can't find a job at home to give them a decent life, plan for the future, build a family. So our goal is to create jobs. That's important.
Customers of the bakery that was open thanks to crowdfunding are delighted with the result.
Before, I used to go to Dakar or send someone to Dakar to get good pastries, but now I don't have to anymore. Now I come here every day or every 2 days to get my supply of pastries.
Last year in Senegal, crowdfunding projects raised a total of 23 million euros. The country on the continent where such projects are booming is South Africa, which raised in 2018 more than 200 million euros.
In Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, cannabis is known to some as Swazi gold. But for farmers who rely on the crop there, that many are struggling to make sales because of a change in the law in South Africa, which has greenlit the growth and use of consumption for private use. Fraser Jackson has more.
Buso has been growing cannabis for 14 years in Eswatini, the country formerly known as Swaziland. There is a potent cannabis strain here known as Swazi gold. He's not allowed to grow it, so sometimes the police arrest him.
This thing is a game like to me, because I farm, sometimes some cops come and ban it.
He sells his product mostly to South Africa, but he's worried that demand will fall because South Africa now allows the private growth and consumption of cannabis.
I need the man from the ganja to make something bigger on my feet at home, to farm maize and beans, you see.
A former South African cannabis dealer underlined the quality of Swazi gold.
They're good guys, they produce good product. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time.
Attitudes towards cannabis are changing in Africa. Last year, Lesotho became the first country on the continent to legalize the production of marijuana for medical use, with Zimbabwe following suit shortly after. According to the UN, more than 10,000 tons of cannabis are produced in Africa every year.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. See you again. Take care.
The world is ever-changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what. France 24, with you everywhere, all the time.